and joining us here on KASM Radio, as she has done in the past on Fridays. And State Representative Demuth, Lisa, we sure appreciate your time. You know, it's an interesting session right now. First of all, I think we just need to rewind and say, boy, it's a beautiful day today outside.
It is a beautiful sunny day. I am in St. Paul, but it's always good to talk with you, Joe, and your listeners.
You know, Lisa, it's an interesting start to the session. Maybe a little background on this. As of right now, we are seeing just a lot of nothing being done right now. There's a stalemate between the two parties.
You know, there really is. And so I was thinking in our opportunities throughout the session, hopefully I'll be able to visit with you and your listeners on a more regular basis. But maybe it's going to have to be a to be continued because there's so many parts to this. But I'll give you kind of a quick overview. So on election night, it came in that the House was going to be tied. That means 67 Republicans and 67 Democrats. If you and then what I did is, knowing that we had a tie for the second time in Minnesota history, it looked like we were going to need some type of a power-sharing agreement. So I was chosen by my caucus to be the leader once again, as I've served for the last 2 years as our caucus leader. Same thing for former Speaker Melissa Hortman. We met on a number of occasions looking at some type of a power-sharing agreement. And I have to tell you, Joe, that those talks, and that was going well. We decided on the committees, on putting in the idea of co-chairs, and really trying to do things in a way that would get the work done for the state of Minnesota. Because from day one, we know there's a lot of work that has to get done in a short period of time, a 5-month period of time. You fast forward to a few weeks later, and it came to the light and then brought to the court, and the court decided that the Democrat who had won in Roseville had lied on his affidavit of candidacy and never lived in the district. By law, as House representatives, we have to live in the district that we represent. That only makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he was found by the courts to have lied and cheated. He could not take the oath of office, and it was determined that he could not become a member of the House of Representatives for that district. So a special election would need to be called. We knew the special election wasn't going to be until March. The governor did try to call it early. He wanted it to happen on the 28th of January, but that was against statute, against the law, and the Supreme Court decided, Governor, you prematurely called that. That special election can't even be called till February 5th for a time later in March. What that did, Joe, is we were no longer going to be at a tie for an unknown period of time. That means there were still 67 Republicans, but because of that vacancy, only 66 Democrats. With that being said, there was no need for a power sharing because if there is not a tie, there's a one-seat majority or advantage by a singular party, so no power sharing was needed. We went ahead forward then. We were going to be sworn into office on January 14th, which is the day that's called for at noon in the seat of government, sworn into office to start the work that all of our constituents expect us to do. That was a problem for the Democrats. They still wanted power sharing, even though they were down a member for an unknown period of time. And they said that they would not come to work unless they could have equal power. Are you following along with this long story, Joe?
We are. It's like story time, and we're just following on as you flip the pages. So, it kind of brings us to this point here where, we have an election that can take place till March, a party that wants to have power sharing, even though there's no tie anymore. But I think your next chapter you're going to go into is the court now says you need a certain number to have a quorum, and we don't have that number.
Yep. So the one other thing that was really key, and I would have continued discussions with Melissa Hortman, moving forward, like if it returned to a tie, because we didn't know that vacant seat in Roseville belongs to the voters until they make a decision on the election, who they want to send. And if they already had one person that was trying to cheat the system, they obviously need a new candidate, and it could go either way. It could go Republican or Democrat. Nobody knows yet. But because the Democrats couldn't get the full power sharing, even though they were one seat short, they chose on their own to do a super secret swearing-in ceremony 2 days before we were called by law to come in. So on Sunday the 12th, they held a swearing-in for just the 66 Democrats in an area in St. Paul, not at the Capitol. There was no media. We only found out because a media person became aware of it after the fact. So not only did they threaten to not show up the first day of session, they decided to be sworn in so they could still collect their paychecks from the taxpayers, even though they weren't going to come to work.
So Lisa, is that legal?
Well, our taxpayers pay for all of our salary. It's about $52,000 as our salary as members of the House of Representatives, not including benefits if people take health insurance and the other benefits. So legal, yes. Moral and right, absolutely not. Taxpayers all over the state have contacted me saying they are on day 18 right now of not showing up for work because they have not been to work. Why are we still paying for them?
So even the swearing in too, referring to that, is that out of bounds too, or no?
It should be out of bounds. It has never been done in the history of Minnesota. The way that they're getting by with it is there has been an occasional situation, maybe an illness or a hospitalization, where a new member can't take the oath of office on the day as prescribed. But never in the history of Minnesota has an entire caucus, an entire group of 66 people said, we don't like the fact that we're down by one member, so we are not going to show up. First time in history. Absolutely unprofessional and wrong, in my opinion. But what happened then is that we came in, and because there is only 133 members that were eligible to even take the oath of office, where the certificate of candidacy was even in, certificate of election was even in with the chief clerk, 133. When you figure a quorum of that is 67. So we went ahead, even though none of our Democrat colleagues were there at all, we went ahead and organized. I was voted in as Speaker of the House. We organized the committees, and we worked that way for 2 full weeks, doing the work, committee hearings, things that matter to Minnesotans about lowering taxes, stopping fraud, making sure that our educational system is providing the education with high standards for our students, looking at the infrastructure needs across the state. So we were already doing the work. Well, Secretary of State Steve Simon and then former Speaker, but Representative Hortman and 2 other Democrat representatives sued me and sued 2 other people in our caucus, saying that we couldn't hold session or do those things because we didn't have a quorum of what is normally 68. We did lose that case a week ago in the Supreme Court. Basically, the Supreme Court, though, said, a quorum is 68, so the full membership, even though there's an empty seat that cannot be filled right now, they made that determination, and that really put a stop to the work for the people of Minnesota, and it ended all of the work that we had already started to do.
Lisa, I don't pretend to be naive, but isn't that a coincidence that number is the one that Simon came up with, or does that just happen to be that's the way it is,
Well, a quorum normally of the House is 68, and we recognize that, but in this case, special circumstances says that there cannot be a person in that empty seat for the area of Roseville until the governor calls it. So it was very, we had attorneys that we were working with, as did the Secretary of State, and we felt very confident that we were doing the right things, not grabbing power that wasn't there, but just getting to work for the people of Minnesota. So we had to put all of that on hold, and Joe, this was week 3, and the Democrats have not even come in or been to work whatsoever. They claim that they're working with their constituents out in their districts, things they never have time for during session when we're in St. Paul. Joe, from me and from other members around Stearns County and central Minnesota, we do both. We meet with constituents. We're in St. Paul. We're at events in our district. You know that we do both because we prioritize the people that we represent. That's not what we're seeing, though, with how this is playing out.
Lisa, how do you respond to this? It's the second straight day I've received an email from DFL leader Melissa Hortman's office, and it says, quote, I invited Leader Demuth to negotiate at 9 a.m. this morning, and she did not show up. We have an obligation to the people of Minnesota to keep negotiating until we reach an agreement, unquote. How do you respond to that?
What I will tell you is that is not true. I had been in conversations with Melissa Hortman trying to figure this out so they would show up to work without saying, here, you can have all the power, even though you don't have the numbers, but working toward an agreement. I was in conversation with her Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, every single day in conversations. Still, she was not coming into work, nor were any of her people, the Democrats, but I was meeting with her face-to-face. We did not schedule a meeting for Wednesday. We did not schedule a meeting for Thursday, but she was communicated that on Thursday we would go ahead and meet this coming Monday, the 3rd, at 9 a.m. And so I was very transparent about that. She did put out an email and put out some things to the press saying that I was refusing. That is not true, and we don't have to argue that because people, they don't want to hear people argue. They just want to know we're working. The offer that she has given, wanting equal power all the way through, that offer expired after they did their secret swearing in, saying we don't want to work with Republicans until we have power back. That offer really expired. That's the one that she has floating around in the media right now. That there were other discussions that were much more productive, but she's not choosing to release that. So there hasn't been any good movement, but there were definite conversations taking place through Thursday as planned, and I look forward to that meeting with her Monday morning again so we can get back at it. But again, 18 straight days that Representative Hortman nor not a single one of the Democrats in the House of Representatives have shown up for work. They have some have even said they've never even stepped foot in the office building that we were moved to back in June, that they've never even come into their office because they don't want to come to the Capitol and be counted toward a quorum.
Lisa, isn't it wacky? I got this thing in my mind saying, you know what, if I was a Democrat, maybe one day I'd be like, you know what, this is enough. I need to get to work. I need to do this. I need to do that. And I'm going to show up. But no, everybody doesn't show up. It really takes, I know it's Democrat, Republican, but you would still think that there's some individuality there to make a decision. Obviously, that's not there, but I don't know. I would just think somebody would, quote, cross the line eventually and say, all right, let's move along.
Right. And that's what we're hopeful. And we have had Democrats that have reached out to some of our members saying, oh, we really want to come back to work. And we've been very clear. Please come back to work. That's what your constituents expect you to do. There will be a place. There will be committee assignments for you. There will be an office. If you get kicked out of your caucus for doing it, we will make sure you have office space. You don't have to become a Republican. We're not asking that. Be an independent, stand up and do what's right for the state of Minnesota, and we will make sure that you are taken care of. Obviously, just show up for work. That is the basic common sense, hardworking things that should take place in the state, and yet we haven't seen a Democrat choose to do that. And unfortunately, we're talking very partisan here, Republicans and Democrats, but it really comes to just do the right thing, show up because that's what you are elected to do, and we will work through this.
I know there's some Democrats or who classifies Democrats listening saying, well, Joe, if the shoe was on the other foot, this would be the same story and the same story just reversed,
What I will tell you with that, Joe, is Republicans would never skip work. We would not do that, and I can guarantee that. And I would never ask an entire caucus, hey, just don't show up while we try to maneuver and get things that we actually don't, that we're not entitled to. Republicans show up to work, and we've proven that every day. Even last year, under the full Democrat trifecta, when the days were really hard and our state, we were raising taxes, the Democrats were by $10 billion on Minnesotans, we still showed up every day, even though we didn't like what was exactly happening.
Finally, I know we're running out of time here, but what do you say to listeners or constituents A lot of people still remember how the session last year ended, and it was nothing to brag about on either side. And then we have this to start the following year. There's a lot of folks out there that, they're having a tough time kind of seeing through the dust here on to the other side here. They're pretty frustrated.
Yeah, and I understand that, as am I. I think that we have a responsibility as elected officials to come in, find ways to work together, stop the manipulation, but also just listen to our constituents and try to do the best we can with what we have. What you're seeing right now and this not showing up for work and this huge division is not serving us well. And we've got to find a way to get through it, and I believe we will. But again, House Republicans have been here every single day since we were sworn in legally on the 14th. We have been here ready to go, and at some point, at least one Democrat, if not all 66, are going to want to join the 67 of us that have been showing up for work every day. I would tell your listeners, don't get discouraged. I know this is hard right now, but we will get through this. We will get our work done for Minnesotans, the things that matter, lowering taxes, stopping fraud, helping our kids, and we can get that work done on time, too.
State Representative Lisa Demuth joining us. Not always easy conversations and topics, but Lisa, we sure appreciate you just kind of mapping it out, walking us through it, giving us an update, and we look forward to visiting here in the weeks ahead, okay?
Sounds so good, Joe. Have a great weekend to you and all of your listeners. It looks like good weather and then a little bit of Minnesota coming back toward the end of the weekend, so it'll be good.